The day Victoria locked her office door, Lucas thought he was about to lose his job. Instead, she asked him one question that shattered everything. When was the last time someone asked if you were okay? His marriage had just ended. His life was in pieces. And his 30-year-old CEO had been watching him fall apart for months, doing something about it while everyone else looked away. This is the story of a man who broke down behind closed doors and the woman who refused to let him disappear. Stay until the end, hit like, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Lucas Bennett's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He sat in his car outside the courthouse, engine off, windows fogged from his breathing. The divorce papers sat in the passenger seat like a passenger he didn't invite. Final. Stamped. Done. 32 years old, and he couldn't remember what his life was supposed to look like now. The rational part of his brain, the part that had gotten him through college, through his first real job, through 7 years of marriage that had quietly rotted from the inside, told him to go home. Unpack the few boxes he'd moved into his new apartment last week, call his sister, eat something, sleep. Instead, he drove to the office. It was barely noon on a Tuesday. Most people would have taken the day off. Hell, most people would have taken the week. But Lucas had learned a long time ago that staying busy meant staying functional, and staying functional meant he didn't have to think about the fact that his wife, ex-wife, had looked at him across that courtroom table like he was a stranger she'd once shared a lease with. The marketing firm where he worked occupied the 7th floor of a glass and steel building downtown. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. He checked his reflection in the mirrored walls. Tie straight, shirt pressed, eyes dry. He'd practiced this face for weeks now, the one that said, everything's fine even when his chest felt like it was caving in. The office was humming with the usual midday energy, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, someone laughing too loud near the break room. Lucas kept his head down as he walked to his desk, mumbled something vague to his coworker Jen when she asked how his morning went, and opened his laptop like it was any other day. It wasn't. He stared at his screen, reading the same email 3 times without absorbing a single word. His calendar was packed. Client presentations. Budget reviews. A campaign launch on Friday that he was supposed to be leading. The kind of work that used to excite him back when he thought he was building something. A career, a life, a future with someone who actually wanted to be in it. Now it all felt like noise. Lucas? He looked up. Jen was standing at the edge of his desk, her expression somewhere between concerned and awkward. Yeah? Victoria wants to see you. His stomach dropped. Victoria Hayes, 30 years old, CEO for the past 2 years, and the kind of leader people either loved or were terrified of depending on the day. Lucas fell somewhere in the middle. She was brilliant, no question. Sharp in meetings, fair with feedback, and she'd grown the firm's revenue by 40% since taking over. But she also had a way of seeing through people that made you feel exposed even when you hadn't said a word. Did she say why? Lucas asked. Jen shook her head. Just that it was important. Great. Lucas closed his laptop and stood, smoothing his tie even though it didn't need it. He'd been at the firm for 4 years. Victoria had been his boss for 2 of them. They'd worked together on dozens of campaigns, sat through countless strategy sessions, exchanged maybe 1,000 emails. But they weren't close. Not in the way that made surprise meetings feel anything other than ominous. He knocked on her office door even though it was already half open. Come in, Victoria said without looking up from her computer, and closed the door. Lucas stepped inside and shut the door behind him, his pulse picking up for reasons he couldn't name. The click of the lock was quiet but definite. She locked it. Victoria's office was minimalist in the way that suggested control rather than taste. Clean desk, 2 monitors, a single framed photo of her and her younger brother at some hiking trail. No clutter, no distractions. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind her desk overlooked the city, and for a second Lucas wondered what it was like to sit here every day, looking down at everything from this height. Sit, she said, finally glancing up. He sat. Victoria studied him for a moment, her dark eyes unreadable. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a white blouse, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look older than 30. Professional. Untouchable. How are you doing? She asked. The question caught him off guard. Not, how's the campaign going? Or, did you finish the client report? Just, how are you? I'm fine, Lucas said automatically. Victoria tilted her head slightly, like she was deciding whether to call him on it. You've been off for weeks, she said. Don't think I haven't noticed. Lucas felt his jaw tighten. I've been keeping up with my work. I didn't say you weren't. Silence settled between them. Lucas wanted to look away, but couldn't. There was something in the way she was looking at him. Not pity, not anger, just awareness. Like she'd been watching something unfold that he thought he'd hidden. I know today was your court date, Victoria said quietly. His chest constricted. How? You put it on your calendar 6 weeks ago, she said. You didn't label it, but you blocked out the whole morning. And you've been different ever since. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. He hadn't told anyone at work about the divorce. Not officially. A few people knew he and his wife had separated. Jen had seen him moving boxes out of his house one weekend and put two and two together. But he hadn't announced it, hadn't made it a thing. And yet Victoria had noticed. I'm handling it, Lucas said, hating how defensive he sounded. Are you? Yes? Victoria leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. When was the last time you took a day off? I don't need When, Lucas? He exhaled slowly. I don't know. A few months. 5 months, Victoria said. You haven't used a single PTO day since March. Lucas blinked. You keep track of that? I keep track of my team, she said simply. And you've been running yourself into the ground. I told you, I'm fine. No, Victoria said, her voice calm but firm. You're not. Something in Lucas snapped. What do you want me to say, yet? He asked, his voice sharper than he intended. That my marriage fell apart? That I'm living in a half-empty apartment with furniture I bought off Facebook Marketplace? That I spent the last 6 months watching my wife check out of our life one day at a time until there was nothing left to fight for? He stopped, breathing hard. Yeah, that happened. But I'm here, aren't I? I'm doing my job. So what the hell do you want from me? Victoria didn't flinch. I want you to stop pretending you're okay when you're not, she said. Lucas stared at her, the anger draining out of him as quickly as it had come. He felt hollow, exposed. Why do you care? He asked quietly. Victoria's expression softened, just barely. Because I've watched you hold yourself together for months, and I know what that cost. Lucas looked down at his hands. They were still shaking. I reassigned the Harper campaign 3 weeks ago, Victoria said. His head snapped up. What? The Harper campaign, the one you were leading. I moved it to Daniel's team. Why would you Because you were drowning, Victoria said, and I wasn't going to let you go under just because you were too stubborn to ask for help. Lucas felt something crack open in his chest. I didn't ask you to do that. I know. I could have handled it. Maybe, Victoria said, but you shouldn't have had to. Lucas didn't know what to say. He'd spent the last 6 months trying to prove to everyone, to his wife, to his co-workers, to himself, that he was fine, that he could handle the weight. And the whole time, Victoria had been quietly lifting pieces of it without saying a word. I don't understand, Lucas said. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have said no, Victoria said. And because sometimes people need protection more than they need control. Her words landed like a punch. Lucas felt his throat tighten, his vision blurring at the edges. He tried to blink it away, but it was too late. The tears came before he could stop them. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I'm sorry, I just... Don't, Victoria said gently. Don't apologize. Lucas pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, trying to pull himself together, but it was useless. Everything he'd been holding back for months came pouring out in that locked office. The anger, the grief, the exhaustion of pretending he was okay when he was barely holding on. And Victoria didn't say anything. She just let him break. When he finally looked up, she was still sitting there, watching him with something that looked almost like understanding. I'm taking you off active projects for 2 weeks, she said. You can't... I can, Victoria said, and I am. You're going to take the time you should have taken months ago. Rest. Figure out what you need. Come back when you're actually ready. Lucas shook his head. I can't afford to... You'll be paid, Victoria said. Full salary. Consider it overdue leave. It's not up for debate, she said. her tone leaving no room for argument. Lucas sat there, stunned. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the fact that his boss, his 30-year-old CEO boss, had just handed him 2 weeks of paid leave because she'd been watching him fall apart and decided to do something about it. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because someone should have done it for me when I needed it, and they didn't." There was something in her voice, something raw and unguarded, that made Lucas look at her differently. For the first time, he saw past the blazer and the clean desk and the controlled exterior. He saw someone who understood what it felt like to break in silence. "Thank you," Lucas said quietly. Victoria nodded. "Go home, Lucas. Take care of yourself." He stood, his legs unsteady, and walked to the door. His hand was on the handle when she spoke again. "And Lucas?" He turned. "You're going to be okay," Victoria said. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you will be." Lucas wanted to believe her. He wasn't sure he did, but something about the way she said it, calm, certain, like it was a fact and not a hope, made him feel like maybe, eventually, he could. He left her office and walked back to his desk in a daze. Jen looked up as he approached, her eyes widening. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah," Lucas said, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel like a complete lie. The first 3 days were the hardest. Lucas spent them in his apartment, staring at walls and unpacked boxes, trying to figure out what he was supposed to do with all this empty time. He'd been running on autopilot for so long that stopping felt like standing still in the middle of a highway. On the 4th day, he went for a run. It wasn't planned. He just woke up at 6 in the morning, put on sneakers he hadn't worn in a year, and started moving. The air was cold and sharp, and his lungs burned after the first mile, but he kept going. By the time he got back to his apartment, he felt something he hadn't felt in months, alive. He started running every morning after that. Small loops around the neighborhood at first, then longer routes through the park. It gave him structure, a reason to get out of bed, a way to burn off the restless energy that had been eating him alive. He cooked actual meals instead of living off takeout. He unpacked the last of his boxes. He called his sister and talked for an hour about nothing important. He slept, and slowly, quietly, he started to feel like himself again. On day 9, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Victoria. "Victoria, how's the time off treating you?" Lucas stared at the message for a long moment. He hadn't expected to hear from her. She'd made it clear that the 2 weeks were his. No check-ins, no pressure, no work talk. But here she was, asking, Lucas. "Better than I thought. Thanks again for this." Victoria, "Good, you needed it." He hesitated, then typed another message. Lucas, "Can I ask you something?" Victoria, "Sure." Lucas, "Why did you really do this? The leave, I mean. You didn't have to." There was a long pause before she replied. Victoria, "Because I've been where you are, and I know what it's like when no one notices." Lucas read the message 3 times. He wanted to ask more, wanted to know what she meant, what had happened to her, why she understood this so deeply. But he didn't. Instead, he just said, "Lucas, thank you." Victoria, "You're welcome." Then a few seconds later, Victoria, "Also, I saw a dog wearing sunglasses today and it made me think of you. No idea why." Lucas laughed out loud. It was such a ridiculous, unexpected message that he didn't know how to respond. So he just sent back a laughing emoji and a question mark. Victoria, "Don't ask. Just accept that you give off golden retriever energy." Lucas, "I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult." Victoria, "Both." Lucas smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. And for the rest of the day, he felt lighter. When Lucas walked back into the office 2 weeks later, everything looked the same. Same desks, same coffee smell, same low hum of conversation. But something felt different, or maybe he felt different. Jen greeted him with a hug and a muffin she'd clearly bought just for him. Daniel asked how he was doing in a way that felt genuine instead of obligatory. Even the intern, whose name Lucas could never remember, smiled and said it was good to have him back. But the person he noticed most was Victoria. She was standing near the conference room, talking to someone from finance, her expression focused and professional. She glanced up as Lucas walked past, and for just a second, their eyes met. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just gave him a small nod. And somehow, that meant more than anything. Lucas settled back into work slowly. His projects had been redistributed while he was gone, so his workload was lighter than usual. It felt strange at first, almost wrong, but he didn't fight it. He focused on the small stuff: emails, updates, strategy notes, nothing that required him to carry the weight he'd been drowning under before. And he noticed something. Victoria checked in. Not obviously. Not in a way that felt like hovering. But she'd stop by his desk every few days with a question that didn't really need asking, or send him an article she thought he'd find interesting, or ask his opinion on something she probably already had an answer to. It felt like she was making sure he was okay without saying it out loud. And Lucas found himself looking forward to those moments more than he wanted to admit. One Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after he'd come back, Victoria called him into her office again. Lucas felt a flicker of nerves as he walked in, but this time she didn't lock the door. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. He sat. "I'm putting you back on the Dalton campaign," Victoria said. "You ready?" Lucas blinked. The Dalton campaign was one of their biggest accounts, high profile, high stakes, and exactly the kind of work he used to thrive on. "Yeah," he said. "I'm ready." Victoria studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good, because I need someone I trust on this, and that's you." Lucas felt something warm settle in his chest. "Thanks." "Don't thank me yet," Victoria said with a slight smile. "It's going to be a lot of work." "I can handle it." "I know you can." There was a pause, then Victoria said, "How are you doing, really?" Lucas thought about it. "Better," he said honestly. "Not perfect, but better." "Good," Victoria said. "That's all anyone can ask." As Lucas stood to leave, Victoria spoke again. "Lucas?" He turned. "If it ever gets hard again," she said quietly, "you tell me, okay?" Lucas nodded. "Okay." And he meant it. The next few months passed in a blur of work and slow, steady healing. Lucas threw himself into the Dalton campaign, and for the first time in a long time, he actually enjoyed it. The creative challenges, the late-night brainstorming sessions, the satisfaction of watching something come together. He also started to notice things he hadn't before, like the way Victoria always made sure her team had lunch during long meetings, or how she never asked anyone to work late unless she was working late too, or the way she listened, really listened, when someone spoke, like their words actually mattered. She was a good boss, but more than that, she was a good person, and Lucas found himself paying attention, not in a way that crossed lines, not in a way that made him uncomfortable, just aware of her, of the way she moved through the office with quiet confidence, of the way she laughed at bad jokes but never at people, of the way she looked at him sometimes, like she was checking to make sure he was still okay. He told himself it didn't mean anything, but deep down, he knew that wasn't true. One evening, after most of the office had cleared out, Lucas was finishing up some notes when Victoria walked past his desk. "Still here?" she asked. "Almost done," Lucas said, glancing up. Victoria hesitated, then said, "Want to grab coffee?" Lucas blinked. "Now?" "Unless you have somewhere to be." He didn't. 10 minutes later, they were sitting in a small cafe 2 blocks from the office, nursing overpriced lattes and talking about everything except work. Victoria told him about growing up with a younger brother who drove her crazy, but who she'd do anything for. Lucas told her about his sister, who'd flown in last month just to make sure he was eating real food. They talked about bad movies they secretly loved, and childhood pets and the weird things people collected. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation that made time disappear. At some point, Victoria said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you come to work that day?" she asked. "The day of your divorce. Why didn't you just go home?" Lucas thought about it. "Because going home meant being alone," he said, "and I didn't want to be alone with what I was feeling." Victoria nodded slowly. "I get that." "Do you?" Lucas asked. She looked at him for a long moment. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I do." There was something in her eyes, something unspoken, that made Lucas want to ask more, but he didn't. Instead, he just said, "Thanks for the coffee." Victoria smiled. "Anytime." And as they walked back to the office together, Lucas realized something. He wasn't alone anymore. And neither was she. Purpose. The shift was gradual. It started with coffee. Then it became lunch. Then it was staying late to work on campaigns that didn't really need both of them, but somehow felt better when they were in it together. Their conversations deepened. They talked about failures and fears, and the versions of themselves they used to be before life got complicated. Victoria told him about the year she almost quit because she didn't think she was good enough. Lucas told her about the night his wife said she didn't love him anymore, and he realized he'd known for months but hadn't wanted to admit it. They didn't cross lines. They didn't make confessions. But something was growing between them that neither of them knew how to name, and it scared the hell out of both of them. One night, Lucas lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what he was feeling. He respected Victoria, admired her, trusted her in a way he hadn't trusted anyone in a long time. But it was more than that, and he didn't know what to do about it. Because she was his boss. Because the power dynamic made everything complicated. Because the last thing he wanted was to ruin the one good thing that had come out of the worst year of his life. So he did what he'd always done. He buried it, and told himself it would go away. It didn't, but burying feelings only works until someone digs them up. 3 months after Lucas returned from his leave, the office threw a holiday party. Nothing fancy, just drinks and appetizers in the conference room, someone's Spotify playlist on shuffle, and the kind of forced mingling that happened when you put coworkers in a room with alcohol and called it team building. Lucas hadn't planned on staying long. He'd show his face, make small talk, then slip out early like he always did at these things. But when he walked in and saw Victoria standing near the windows, alone with a glass of wine she wasn't drinking, something made him stay. He grabbed a beer from the cooler and walked over. "Not a party person?" he asked. Victoria glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Is it that obvious?" "You're standing in the corner like you're planning an escape route." "I am," she admitted. "Want to help me execute it?" Lucas laughed. "Where are we going?" "Anywhere but here." 20 minutes later, they were sitting on the rooftop deck of the building. The city lights stretched out below them like something out of a postcard. The air was cold enough to see their breath, but neither of them seemed to care. "This is better," Victoria said, leaning against the railing. "Way better," Lucas agreed. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their drinks and watching the traffic move far below. It felt easy, natural, like they'd done this 100 times before. "Can I ask you something?" Lucas said eventually. "Always. Why did you become CEO so young?" Victoria looked at him, surprised. "That's what you want to know?" "Yeah." She thought about it, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "Because my dad built this company from nothing," she said quietly. "And when he got sick, someone had to step up. I was 28, barely ready, but I couldn't let it fall apart." "Is he okay now?" Lucas asked. Victoria shook her head. "He passed 2 years ago, right before I officially took over." "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said. "He got to see me succeed. That mattered to him." Lucas studied her face in the dim light. There was something unguarded in her expression, something she didn't let people see in the office. "That's a lot of pressure," he said. "It was," Victoria admitted. "Still is some days. But I didn't have a choice. This company was his legacy. I wasn't going to let it die just because I was scared." "You don't seem like someone who gets scared." Victoria laughed, but it was brittle. "I'm terrified most of the time. I just hide it better than most people." Lucas didn't know what to say to that. He'd spent months watching Victoria lead with confidence, make decisions without hesitation, carry the weight of an entire company on her shoulders like it was nothing. And now she was telling him it was all an act. "I never would have guessed," he said honestly. "Good," Victoria said. "That means I'm doing it right." They fell quiet again. Down below, someone honked a horn. A siren wailed in the distance. The city kept moving, indifferent to their small moment of stillness. "Can I ask you something now?" Victoria said. "Fair's fair." "Why did you stay with her for so long?" Lucas had been expecting the question eventually. He just hadn't expected it to hurt this much when it came. "Because I thought love was supposed to be hard," he said. "I thought if I just tried harder, fixed the right things, became the right version of myself, it would work. And? And I was wrong, Lucas said. Love shouldn't feel like drowning. But Victoria turned to look at him fully. No, she said softly. It shouldn't. There was something in the way she said it, something that felt like understanding, like she'd been there too. Lucas wanted to ask, wanted to know who had made her feel that way. But he didn't, because some things didn't need to be said out loud to be understood. Do you regret it? Victoria asked. The marriage, I mean. Lucas thought about it. No, he said. I regret how long I stayed, but I don't regret trying. That's a good answer. What about you? Lucas asked. Ever been married? Victoria shook her head. Came close once, but I couldn't pull the trigger. Why not? She hesitated, then said, Because I knew I'd lose myself in it, and I wasn't ready to give up who I was for someone who didn't really see me. Lucas understood that more than he wanted to admit. They stayed on the rooftop for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. At some point, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Jen asking where she'd disappeared to. She ignored it. When they finally went back downstairs, the party was winding down. People were gathering their coats, saying their goodbyes, making plans they wouldn't keep. Lucas and Victoria slipped back in like they'd never left. But something had shifted, and they both felt it. Over the next few weeks, their late-night conversations became routine. Sometimes it was work-related, strategy sessions that turned into philosophical debates about what made good marketing. Other times it was personal. Victoria told him about the year she spent backpacking through Europe after college, trying to figure out who she was outside of her father's shadow. Lucas told her about the summer he spent teaching kids how to swim at a community pool, back when he still thought he might become a teacher instead of going into marketing. They learned each other's rhythms. Lucas knew that Victoria always ordered her coffee black, but secretly loved caramel lattes. Victoria knew that Lucas got quiet when he was stressed, and that the best way to pull him out of it was to ask him about his nephew. They didn't talk about what was happening between them, didn't acknowledge the way conversations lingered longer than they needed to, or the way their eyes found each other across crowded rooms, or the way Lucas's chest tightened every time Victoria smiled at something he said, because acknowledging it meant dealing with it, and neither of them was ready for that. One Tuesday afternoon, Lucas was working on a pitch deck when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello? Lucas? His blood went cold. It was Sarah, his ex-wife. How did you get this number? He asked, his voice flat. I still have it saved, she said. From before. Lucas closed his laptop and stood, walking toward the stairwell where no one could hear him. What do you want, Sarah? There was a pause. Then, quietly, I made a mistake. Lucas leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. We're not doing this. Please, just listen. No, Lucas said firmly. We're done. The papers are signed. It's over. I know, Sarah said, and her voice broke. I know it's over, but I need you to know that I regret it, all of it. Lucas didn't say anything. He didn't trust himself to. I was scared, Sarah continued, of us, of the future, of the idea that we'd just become another boring couple who stopped trying. So I pushed you away before you could leave me first. I wasn't going to leave you, Lucas said. I know that now. Lucas exhaled slowly. Why are you calling me, Sarah? Because I can't stop thinking about what we had, she said, and I know I ruined it. But I need to know if there's any part of you that thinks we could try again. Lucas was quiet for a long time. 6 months ago, he would have said yes without hesitation. He would have taken her back, convinced himself that love meant fighting for something even when it was broken beyond repair. But that was 6 months ago. No, Lucas said. There isn't. Sarah made a sound like she'd been punched. Lucas, you made your choice, he said, not unkindly, and I've made mine. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it's not me. He hung up before she could respond. Lucas stood in the stairwell for a long time, staring at his phone. He waited for the guilt to come. The doubt. The part of him that would second-guess his decision. It didn't. Because for the first time in his life, Lucas knew exactly what he wanted, and it wasn't going backward. When he walked back into the office, Victoria was standing near his desk, holding a folder. "You okay?" she asked, frowning. "Yeah," Lucas said. "Why?" "You look like you just ran a marathon." Lucas managed a laugh. "Something like that." Victoria studied him for a moment, then said, "Come to my office." "Now?" "Now." Lucas followed her, and once again she closed the door. But this time she didn't lock it. "What happened?" Victoria asked, crossing her arms. Lucas debated lying, but he was tired of lying, tired of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. "My ex-wife called," he said. Victoria's expression shifted. "What did she want?" "To get back together." "And?" "And I said no." Victoria didn't say anything for a moment, then quietly, "How do you feel about that?" Lucas thought about it. "Relieved," he said. "And a little sad, but mostly relieved." Victoria nodded slowly. "That's good. That means you're healing." "Yeah," Lucas said. "I think I am." There was a beat of silence, then Victoria said, "For what it's worth, I think you made the right call." "You do?" "Yeah," she said. "You deserve someone who sees you, really sees you, not someone who only realizes your worth after they've already thrown it away." Lucas looked at her, and for a second he wondered if she was talking about him or about herself. "Thanks," he said. Victoria gave him a small smile. "Any time." As Lucas turned to leave, Victoria spoke again. "Lucas?" He stopped. "I'm glad you're okay," she said. "Me too," Lucas said. And he meant it. The weeks that followed felt different, lighter, somehow. Lucas threw himself into work with a focus he hadn't felt in years. He led campaigns, mentored junior team members, even pitched a new client strategy that Victoria called one of the best ideas she'd heard all year. But more than that, he started to feel like himself again. Not the version of himself that had been married to Sarah. Not the version that had spent months drowning in grief. Just him. And the more he found himself, the more he noticed Victoria. It wasn't intentional. It just happened. He noticed the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The way she laughed at Daniel's terrible jokes, even though she clearly didn't think they were funny. The way she always remembered small details, like how Lucas liked his sandwiches from the deli downstairs, or that he hated meetings before 10 in the morning. He noticed the way she looked at him sometimes, when she thought he wasn't paying attention, like she was trying to figure something out but wasn't ready to say it out loud. And he noticed the way his heart picked up speed every time she walked into a room. It was a problem, because Lucas knew better than to fall for his boss. He knew the optics, the complications, the power dynamics that made the whole thing impossible. He knew that even if Victoria felt the same way, which was a big if, acting on it could ruin everything they'd built. So he tried to ignore it. He really did. But ignoring feelings only works until you can't anymore. One Friday night, after most of the office had cleared out, Lucas was finishing up a report when Victoria appeared at his desk. "Still here?" she asked. Lucas glanced up. "Almost done. You?" "Same." She hesitated, then said, "Want to grab dinner?" Lucas blinked. "Like, now?" "Unless you have plans." He didn't. 30 minutes later, they were sitting in a small Italian restaurant a few blocks away, sharing a bottle of red wine and arguing about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. "It's fruit," Victoria said, gesturing with her fork. "Fruit does not go on pizza." "Tomatoes are fruit," Lucas pointed out. "That's different." "How?" "Because tomatoes are savory," Victoria said. "Pineapple is sweet. It's a crime against food." Lucas laughed. "You're very passionate about this." "I have standards." They ordered food and fell into easy conversation, the kind that flowed without effort. At some point, Victoria told him about a disastrous date she'd gone on a few years ago, and Lucas laughed so hard he almost choked on his wine. "I'm serious," Victoria said, grinning. "He brought his mother." "To the date?" "To the date." "Why?" "He said she wanted to meet me," Victoria said, shaking her head. "I left before the appetizers came." Lucas couldn't stop laughing. "That's insane." "Tell me about it." When their food arrived, they ate slowly, talking between bites. The restaurant was warm and dimly lit, and the noise of the city felt far away. For the first time in months, Lucas felt completely at ease. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said eventually. "Sure." "Why haven't you dated anyone since the divorce?" Lucas paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I guess I haven't felt ready." "Do you think you'll ever be ready?" "Maybe," Lucas said. "I don't know what that looks like yet." Victoria nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I get that." "What about you?" Lucas asked. "You date much?" Victoria laughed. "Not really. I'm terrible at it." "I don't believe that." "It's true," she said. "I'm too busy. Too picky. Too something. I don't know. I just haven't found anyone who feels worth the effort." Lucas wanted to ask what she meant by that. Wanted to know what she was looking for, what kind of person could break through the walls she'd built so carefully around herself. But he didn't, because he was afraid of the answer. They stayed at the restaurant until it closed, talking and laughing and avoiding the thing neither of them was ready to name. When they finally left, the streets were quiet, and the air was cold, and Lucas walked Victoria to her car, even though she insisted she didn't need an escort. "Thanks for tonight," Lucas said. "Thanks for saying yes," Victoria replied. They stood there for a moment, neither of them moving. Lucas felt the pull, the urge to say something, to acknowledge what was happening between them. But he didn't, and neither did she. "Get home safe," Victoria said. "You too." As Lucas watched her drive away, he realized something. He was falling for her, and he had no idea what to do about it. The next Monday, everything felt normal. Work emails, team meetings, strategy sessions. Lucas and Victoria moved through the day like they always did, professional, focused, careful not to cross any lines. But something had changed. Lucas could feel it in the way Victoria's eyes lingered on him a second too long during meetings, in the way she found excuses to stop by his desk, in the way her smile softened when she looked at him like she was seeing something she hadn't noticed before, and he wondered if she felt it too. One afternoon, Jen cornered him in the break room. "Okay, what's going on with you and Victoria?" she asked. Lucas nearly dropped his coffee. "What?" "Don't play dumb," Jen said. "You two have been acting weird for weeks." "We're not acting weird." "Lucas, you literally left the holiday party together and didn't come back for an hour." "We went to the rooftop." "Exactly," Jen said, raising an eyebrow. "So, what's going on?" "Nothing," Lucas said firmly. "We're just friends." Jen gave him a look that said she didn't believe him for a second. "Okay, but for the record, if something were going on, I wouldn't judge you." "There's nothing to judge." "Sure," Jen said, smirking. "Keep telling yourself that." Lucas spent the rest of the day trying to convince himself that Jen was wrong, that there was nothing happening between him and Victoria, that he was just projecting his own feelings onto a perfectly normal professional relationship. But that night, when Victoria texted him a photo of a dog wearing a tie with the caption, "You," Lucas smiled so wide his face hurt, and he knew he was lying to himself. 2 weeks later, everything came to a head. Lucas was working late trying to finish a presentation for a client meeting the next morning. The office was empty except for him and the janitor, who came through around 9, or so he thought. At 10:30, Victoria walked into the office, looking surprised to see him still there. "What are you doing here?" Lucas asked. "I left my laptop," Victoria said, holding it up. "What are you doing here?" "Finishing the Morrison pitch." Victoria frowned. "That's not due until next week." "I know. I just wanted to get ahead of it." She walked over to his desk and looked at his screen. "This is good work, Lucas." "Thanks." Victoria pulled up a chair and sat down. "Want a second set of eyes?" "You don't have to." "I know," she said, "but I want to." So they worked together, side by side, for the next hour. Victoria made suggestions. Lucas refined his ideas. They debated phrasing and imagery and the best way to hook a skeptical client. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Lucas realized he'd never felt more seen. When they finally finished, it was past midnight. The city outside was quiet, and the office felt like a different world entirely. "Thanks for the help," Lucas said. "Any time," Victoria replied. They sat there for a moment, neither of them moving. The air between them felt heavy, charged with something neither of them wanted to name. "Lucas," Victoria said quietly. "Yeah?" She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I need to tell you something." Lucas's heart started pounding. Okay. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked away, her jaw tight. Never mind, she said, standing abruptly. It's late. You should get home. Victoria? Good night, Lucas. She left before he could say anything else. Lucas sat there in the empty office, staring at the spot where she'd been, wondering what she'd been about to say, and knowing deep down that it was the same thing he'd been too afraid to admit. The next morning, Lucas arrived at the office to find Victoria already at her desk, headphones on, eyes locked on her screen like she was trying to disappear into her work. She didn't look up when he walked past, didn't acknowledge him at all. Lucas sat down at his own desk and tried to focus, but his mind kept circling back to the night before, the way Victoria had looked at him, the way she'd started to say something and then stopped herself, the way she'd left like she was running from something. He wanted to go to her office and ask what she'd been about to say, but he also knew that pushing her would only make her pull away further. So he did nothing, and that felt worse than anything. The week dragged on in painful silence. Victoria was polite when they had to interact, professional even, but there was a distance between them now that hadn't been there before. She stopped texting him after hours, stopped finding excuses to stop by his desk, stopped looking at him like he was someone who mattered. It was like watching a door close in slow motion. Lucas told himself it was for the best, that whatever had been building between them was a bad idea anyway, that keeping things professional was the smart move, but it didn't feel smart. It felt like losing something before he'd ever really had it. On Thursday afternoon, Jen walked past his desk and dropped a post-it note in front of him. Lucas picked it up. It read, "You look miserable. Fix it." He crumpled the note and threw it at her. She dodged it, grinning. "I'm serious," Jen said, leaning against his desk. "Whatever's going on with you two, you need to deal with it." "There's nothing going on," Lucas said automatically. "Right," Jen said, "and I'm the Queen of England." Lucas sighed. "It's complicated." "It always is," Jen said, "but ignoring it isn't going to make it go away." She was right. Lucas knew she was right, but knowing something and acting on it were two different things. That night, Lucas sat in his apartment staring at his phone, trying to decide if he should text Victoria. He typed and deleted half a dozen messages before finally settling on something simple. "Lucas, you okay?" He stared at the screen, waiting for the three dots to appear. They didn't. After 20 minutes, he put his phone down and tried to convince himself that it didn't matter. It did. The next morning, Lucas walked into the office and immediately knew something was wrong. Jen was standing near the reception desk with Daniel, both of them talking in low voices. When they saw Lucas, they stopped. "What's going on?" Lucas asked. Jen and Daniel exchanged a glance. "Sarah's here," Jen said quietly. Lucas felt his stomach drop. "What?" "She showed up about 10 minutes ago," Daniel said. "She's in the lobby. She's asking for you." Lucas closed his eyes, his jaw tight. "You've got to be kidding me." "I can tell her to leave," Jen offered. "No," Lucas said. "I'll handle it." He walked to the lobby, his heart pounding, and there she was, Sarah, sitting on one of the sleek leather couches, looking smaller than he remembered. She stood when she saw him, her expression nervous. "Hi," she said. "What are you doing here?" Lucas asked, keeping his voice low. "I needed to see you," Sarah said. "You wouldn't answer my calls." "Because I have nothing to say to you." "Please, Lucas," Sarah said, her eyes welling up. "Just give me 5 minutes." Lucas glanced around the lobby. People were starting to notice. He could see the receptionist pretending not to listen while clearly listening to every word. "Fine," Lucas said, "but not here." They walked outside to the plaza in front of the building. It was cold, and Sarah wrapped her arms around herself like she hadn't thought to bring a coat. "Talk," Lucas said. Sarah took a shaky breath. "I know I hurt you," she said. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but I can't stop thinking about what we had, and I need to know if there's any part of you that still loves me." Lucas looked at her, really looked at her, and tried to find the feeling he'd spent 7 years building a life around. The love, the hope, the belief that they were supposed to be together. It wasn't there. "No," Lucas said quietly. "There isn't." Sarah's face crumpled. "How can you say that?" "Because it's true," Lucas said. "I spent months trying to save something that was already dead. And I'm done pretending." We could start over, Sarah said desperately. We could go to therapy. We could. When I was falling apart, Lucas interrupted. Did you notice? Sarah blinked, thrown by the question. What? When I was drowning, Lucas said, his voice steady. When I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't get out of bed most mornings. Did you notice? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. That's what I thought, Lucas said. I was dealing with my own stuff, Sarah said defensively. I know, Lucas said. And I'm not saying you're a bad person, but someone else noticed. Someone stepped in when I couldn't ask for help. And that showed me what it actually looks like when someone cares. Sarah's eyes widened. You're with someone else? No, Lucas said. But that's not the point. Then what is? The point is that I deserve someone who sees me, Lucas said. And you never did. Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but she couldn't because they both knew he was right. I'm sorry, Sarah said, her voice breaking. Me too, Lucas said. But we're done, Sarah. For real this time. He turned and walked back into the building, leaving her standing there. His hands were shaking, but his chest felt lighter than it had in months. When he got back to his floor, Jen was waiting by the elevators. You okay? She asked. Yeah, Lucas said. I am. And for the first time, he actually meant it. Lucas went straight to his desk, trying to shake off the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He opened his laptop and stared at the screen, but the words blurred together. All he could think about was what he'd said to Sarah. Someone else noticed. Someone stepped in when I couldn't ask for help. He'd meant Victoria. And the truth of it hit him harder than he expected. Lucas stood abruptly and walked toward Victoria's office. Her door was half open, and she was on a call, her voice calm and professional as she discussed contract terms with someone on the other end. She glanced up when she saw him, and for a split second, something flickered in her expression. Concern, maybe, or curiosity. But she looked away just as quickly. Lucas hovered in the doorway, waiting. When Victoria finally hung up, she turned to him. Everything okay? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Can we talk? Lucas said. Victoria hesitated, then nodded. Close the door. He did, but this time he didn't sit down. He just stood there trying to find the right words. My ex-wife showed up, he said. Victoria's expression shifted. Here? Downstairs, she wanted to talk. What did she want? Another chance, Lucas said. She asked if I still loved her. Victoria was very still. And what did you say? I said no. There was a beat of silence. Then Victoria said, How do you feel about that? Relieved, Lucas said. And sure. For the first time in a long time, I'm sure. Victoria nodded slowly, her face unreadable. Good. That's good. Lucas took a step closer. I told her something else too. What? I told her that someone noticed when I was falling apart, Lucas said. Someone who stepped in when I couldn't ask for help. And that showed me what it looks like when someone actually cares. Victoria's breath caught, just barely. Lucas, I was talking about you, he said. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. Victoria looked away, her jaw tight. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because it complicates everything. It's already complicated, Lucas said. Victoria stood, putting the desk between them like a barrier. I'm your boss, Lucas. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand the position this puts us both in? I know, Lucas said, but I also know that what I feel isn't going away just because it's inconvenient. It's not just inconvenient, Victoria said, her voice rising slightly. It's impossible. Is it? Lucas asked. Because it doesn't feel impossible. It feels like the most real thing I've felt in years. Victoria closed her eyes, her hands gripping the edge of her desk. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me, Lucas said. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't feel the same way. Victoria opened her eyes, and for the first time Lucas saw something break in her expression. I can't, she said quietly. Why not? Because I'd be lying. The admission hit Lucas like a physical blow. He'd known, on some level, he'd known, but hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way nothing else could. Then what are we doing? Lucas asked. Why are we pretending this isn't happening? Because I have to, Victoria said, her voice cracking. Because if I don't, I could lose everything. My credibility, my reputation, the respect of everyone in this building. And you... She stopped, her throat working. You could lose your career. People would say I took advantage of you, that I crossed a line I had no business crossing. I don't care what people say, Lucas said. Well, I do, Victoria said sharply. Because I've spent my entire life building something that matters, and I won't throw it away just because... She stopped herself. Just because what? Lucas pressed. Victoria looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Just because I fell for someone I shouldn't have. Lucas felt his chest tighten. Victoria, I need you to leave, she said, her voice breaking. Please, Lucas, I need you to leave. Lucas wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight and make her see that this, whatever this was worth the risk. But he could see the pain in her eyes, the fear, the weight of a decision she'd already made. So he left, and it felt like walking away from something he'd never get back. The rest of the day was a blur. Lucas went through the motions, answered emails, sat in meetings, nodded along to conversations he didn't hear. But all he could think about was the look on Victoria's face when she told him to leave. When 5 o'clock came, Lucas packed up his things and headed for the elevator. He was halfway there when Jen caught up with him. Hey, she said. You okay? Not really, Lucas admitted. Jen studied his face. Want to grab a drink? Lucas shook his head. I just want to go home. Okay, Jen said gently. But if you need to talk, I'm here. Thanks. Lucas drove home in silence, his mind racing. He kept replaying the conversation with Victoria over and over, trying to figure out if there was something he could have said differently, some way he could have made her see that the risk was worth it. But deep down, he knew it wasn't about logic, it was about fear. And fear was a hell of a lot harder to argue with. When he got to his apartment, Lucas collapsed onto the couch and stared at the ceiling. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. Emma, haven't heard from you in a while. You good? Lucas typed back, yeah, just a rough day. Emma, want to talk about it? Lucas, not really. Emma, okay, but I'm here if you change your mind. Lucas put his phone down and closed his eyes. He thought about Sarah, showing up at his office like she could rewind time and undo the damage she'd done. He thought about the way he'd felt when he told her no, certain, clear, free. And then he thought about Victoria, the way she'd looked at him when she admitted she'd fallen for him, the way her voice had broken when she told him to leave. Lucas didn't know what to do with any of it, so he did the only thing he could. He let himself feel it, all of it, the heartbreak and the hope, and the terrible aching certainty that he'd found something real and lost it in the same breath, and he let himself cry. The next morning, Lucas woke up with a headache and a sense of clarity he hadn't expected. He'd spent the night thinking about everything, about Sarah, about Victoria, about the life he'd been trying to build from the wreckage of his divorce. And he realized something. He couldn't control how Victoria felt, couldn't force her to take a risk she wasn't ready for, but he could control how he moved forward, so he decided to let it go. Not the feelings, those weren't going anywhere, but the expectation, the hope that things would change. He'd put the truth out there, and now it was up to Victoria to decide what to do with it. Lucas got ready for work and walked into the office with his head held high. He greeted Jen with a smile, nodded at Daniel, and sat down at his desk like it was any other day. And when Victoria walked past without looking at him, he didn't let it break him. The week passed slowly. Lucas threw himself into work, finishing projects ahead of schedule and volunteering for assignments no one else wanted. It gave him something to focus on, something that wasn't the hollow ache in his chest every time he saw Victoria across the room. They didn't talk, not about what had happened, not about anything personal. Their interactions were brief and professional, emails about deadlines, quick conversations and meetings, nothing more. It was exactly what Victoria had asked for, and it was killing both of them. On Friday afternoon, Lucas was packing up his things when his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Unknown. This is Victoria. Can you meet me at the coffee shop on 5th, tonight at 7? Lucas stared at the message, his heart pounding. He didn't know what she wanted, didn't know if this was a good idea or a terrible one, but he typed back, I'll be there. At 7 o'clock, Lucas walked into the small coffee shop Victoria had mentioned. It was quiet, nearly empty except for a couple in the corner and a student with headphones on. Victoria was sitting at a table near the window, her hands wrapped around a mug she didn't seem to be drinking from. Lucas sat down across from her. "Hi." "Hi," Victoria said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Victoria said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about what I said, and I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" Lucas asked. "This," Victoria said, gesturing between them. "Whatever this is. I don't know how to navigate it without ruining everything." "So what are you saying?" Lucas asked carefully. Victoria took a shaky breath. "I'm saying that I can't stop thinking about you. And I've tried. I've tried to bury it and ignore it and convince myself it's not real. But it is. And I don't know what to do with that." Lucas felt something loosen in his chest. "So what do you want to do?" "I don't know," Victoria admitted. "But I know I can't keep pretending this doesn't exist." "Then don't," Lucas said. Victoria looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "What if we ruin everything?" "What if we don't?" Lucas countered. Victoria laughed, but it was shaky. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," Lucas said. "But maybe it doesn't have to be as complicated as we're making it." Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I need time to figure out what this looks like, to figure out if there's a way to do this without destroying everything I've built." "Okay," Lucas said. "Take all the time you need." "You're not going to push me?" Victoria asked, surprised. "No," Lucas said, "because I want you to be sure. And if that means waiting, then I'll wait." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you so patient with me?" "Because you're worth it," Lucas said simply. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time they'd touched like this, intentionally, without pretense, and Lucas felt the warmth of it spread through him like sunlight. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me," she said. "Really seeing me. Not just the boss or the CEO or the person everyone expects me to be. Just me." Lucas squeezed her hand. "That's the only version of you I've ever cared about." They sat there for a long time, hands clasped across the table, not saying anything. And for the first time in weeks, Lucas felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. But the universe, as it turned out, had other plans. 2 weeks later, everything shifted again. Lucas was in a meeting when his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. He glanced at it discreetly under the table. "Victoria, my office. Now. It's important." Lucas excused himself from the meeting and walked to Victoria's office, his stomach twisting with anxiety. When he walked in, she was standing by the window, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "Close the door," she said. Lucas did. "What's going on?" Victoria turned to face him. "I've made a decision." Lucas's heart started pounding. "About what?" Victoria took a deep breath. "About us." Lucas felt his breath catch. He'd been waiting for this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, he didn't know if he was ready for whatever she was about to say. "Okay," he said quietly. Victoria walked to her desk and picked up a manila folder. She held it for a moment, her fingers trembling slightly, then handed it to him. Lucas opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a resignation letter. Effective 30 days from today. He looked up at her, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "What is this?" "It's my resignation," Victoria said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "I'm stepping down as CEO." Lucas felt the floor drop out from under him. "You're what?" "I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks," Victoria said, "and I've made my decision. I'm leaving." "Because of me?" Lucas asked, his voice tight. "Because of us," Victoria corrected. "And because I can't keep living in a box where the rules say I have to choose between my career and the chance to actually be happy." Lucas shook his head, setting the folder down on her desk. "You can't do this. This company is everything to you." "It was," Victoria said, "but it's not anymore." "Victoria, you've worked your whole life for this." "I know," she said, "but I've also spent my whole life doing what I was supposed to do, building what I was supposed to build, being who everyone expected me to be. And I'm tired, Lucas. I'm tired of living like this. Lucas ran his hand through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. What about your father's legacy? What about everything you've built here? My father's legacy isn't going anywhere, Victoria said. I've already talked to the board. Daniel's going to take over as interim CEO, and we'll do a proper search for my replacement. The company will be fine. But you won't, Lucas said. You'll regret this. Maybe, Victoria admitted, but I'll regret it a hell of a lot less than I'd regret never taking the chance. Lucas looked at her, standing there with her shoulders back and her chin up, and he saw something in her he'd never seen before. Not confidence or control or the carefully maintained facade she showed the world. Just raw, terrifying courage. You're serious about this, he said. I am. And this is what you want? Victoria's expression softened. What I want is a life where I don't have to choose between being professional and being human, where I don't have to lock my feelings in a drawer just to maintain appearances, where I can care about someone without worrying that it'll cost me everything. So you're doing this for me, Lucas said. No, Victoria said firmly. I'm doing this for me, because I deserve more than what I've been settling for. And so do you. Lucas didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to tell her not to do it, that they could find another way, that she didn't have to give up everything she'd worked for. But another part of him, the part that had been watching her carry impossible weight for months, understood exactly why she was doing this. 30 days, Lucas said. 30 days, Victoria confirmed. And then what? Victoria took a step closer to him. And then we figure it out, together, if you still want to. Lucas looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear behind her bravery, the uncertainty, the hope that maybe, just maybe, this leap wouldn't end in disaster. Of course I still want to, he said. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Then I guess we're doing this. I guess we are. They stood there for a moment, the weight of what she'd just done settling between them like something fragile and precious. Does anyone else know? Lucas asked. Just the board, Victoria said. I'll announce it to the company on Monday. Lucas nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. How do you feel? Victoria let out a shaky laugh. Terrified, relieved, completely insane, all of the above. That sounds about right, Lucas said. Victoria smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached her eyes. I should get back to work. I have a lot to do in the next 30 days. Yeah, Lucas said. Me too. As he turned to leave, Victoria called his name. Lucas? He stopped. Thank you, she said, for being worth the risk. Lucas felt something warm bloom in his chest. Right back at you. The weekend passed in a haze of disbelief and anticipation. Lucas kept checking his phone, half expecting Victoria to text him and say she'd changed her mind. But she didn't. And on Monday morning, when he walked into the office, the announcement was already waiting in his inbox. It was brief and professional. Victoria Hayes would be stepping down as CEO effective 30 days from today. Daniel Chen would serve as interim CEO, while the board conducted a search for her permanent replacement. Victoria thanked the team for their support and expressed confidence in the company's future. The office erupted into chaos. People clustered in small groups, whispering and speculating. Jen appeared at Lucas's desk within minutes, her eyes wide. Did you know about this? She asked. Lucas hesitated. Yeah. And you didn't tell me. It wasn't my news to share, Lucas said. Jen studied his face. This is about you, isn't it? Lucas didn't answer. Oh my God, Jen said, sinking into the chair next to his desk. You two are really doing this. It's not like that, Lucas started. Lucas, she's stepping down as CEO, Jen said. It's exactly like that. Lucas glanced around to make sure no one was listening. She didn't do it just for me. She did it because she was tired of living in a cage. And you just happened to be the key, Jen said. Lucas sighed. I didn't ask her to do this. I know, Jen said, her expression softening. But she did it anyway. That's kind of incredible. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. The rest of the day was a blur of meetings and damage control. Victoria spent most of it in the conference room with the board, hammering out transition plans and fielding questions. When she finally emerged late in the afternoon, she looked exhausted. Lucas caught her eye across the office. She gave him a small smile, and he felt some of the tension in his chest ease. That night, Victoria texted him. Victoria, that was the longest day of my life. Lucas, how'd it go? Victoria, about as well as expected. The board's supportive, but there are a lot of logistics to work out. Lucas, are you okay? Victoria, ask me again in 30 days. Lucas, fair enough. There was a pause. Then, Victoria, I'm not having second thoughts, if that's what you're wondering. Lucas, I wasn't, but it's good to know. Victoria, liar. You were totally wondering. Lucas smiled. Lucas, maybe a little. Victoria, I'm scared, Lucas, but I'm not sorry. Lucas, that's all that matters. The next 30 days were some of the strangest of Lucas's life. He watched Victoria systematically dismantle the empire she'd built, handing off responsibilities and training Daniel to take over. She did it with the same precision and grace she brought to everything else, but Lucas could see the toll it was taking. She looked tired, worn down in a way she hadn't been before, and Lucas wanted nothing more than to tell her it would all be worth it, but he couldn't promise that. So he just stayed close, offered support when she needed it, gave her space when she didn't, and slowly the days ticked by. On day 15, Sarah called again. Lucas almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. What do you want, Sarah? He asked. I heard about your boss, she said, the one who's stepping down. Lucas's jaw tightened. How did you hear about that? I still have friends at the firm, Sarah said. Is it true? Is she leaving because of you? That's none of your business. So it is true, Sarah said, and there was something bitter in her voice. You're with her. I'm not having this conversation, Lucas said. You moved on fast, Sarah said. You don't get to do this, Lucas said, his voice sharp. You don't get to act hurt when you were the one who left. I know, Sarah said quietly. I needed to know if it was real, what you said about someone noticing. Lucas took a breath, forcing himself to calm down. It was real. And it's her, Sarah said. The CEO. Yeah, Lucas said. It's her. There was a long silence. Then Sarah said, I hope she makes you happy. She does, Lucas said. Good, Sarah said, and she sounded like she meant it. You deserve that. Lucas hung up and sat there for a moment, staring at his phone. It was the first time Sarah had ever acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been what he needed, and it felt like closure. On day 20, Victoria had a breakdown. Lucas found her in her office late one evening, her head in her hands, papers scattered across her desk. She looked up when he walked in, and he could see the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. I don't know if I can do this, she said. Lucas closed the door and sat down across from her. Talk to me. I've been going through my dad's old files, Victoria said, her voice shaking, trying to make sure everything's in order before I hand it all over. And I keep finding notes he wrote. Little things, reminders, plans for the company's future. And all I can think is that I'm abandoning everything he built. You're not abandoning it, Lucas said gently. You're trusting someone else to carry it forward. But what if they ruin it? Victoria asked. What if I leave and everything falls apart? It won't, Lucas said. Because you've built a team that knows what they're doing, and because the company is stronger than any one person, even you. Victoria looked at him, her eyes red. What if I'm making a mistake? Then you'll deal with it, Lucas said. But I don't think you are. How can you be so sure? Because I've watched you carry this weight for months, Lucas said, and I've seen what it costs you, and I think you're finally choosing yourself. That's not a mistake. Victoria closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. I'm so tired, Lucas. I know, he said, but you're almost there? She nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you for not running when things got hard. I'm not going anywhere, Lucas said. Victoria gave him a watery smile. You better not. On day 28, the board finalized Victoria's replacement. It was someone from outside the company, a seasoned executive with an impressive track record. Victoria met with them for hours, walking them through the ins and outs of the business, making sure the transition would be smooth. And when it was done, she looked lighter than Lucas had seen her in weeks. How does it feel? He asked when they grabbed coffee after work. Strange, Victoria admitted, like I'm watching someone else's life fall into place. Good strange or bad strange? Both, Victoria said, but more good than bad. Lucas smiled. That's progress. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. 2 more days. 2 more days, Lucas repeated. Are you ready for this? She asked. Are you? Victoria laughed. No, but I'm doing it anyway. On Victoria's last day, the office threw her a small party. Nothing extravagant, just cake and coffee and a few heartfelt speeches about what she'd meant to the company. Daniel gave a toast. Jen cried. Even the intern whose name Lucas still couldn't remember looked genuinely sad to see her go. Victoria handled it with grace, thanking everyone and promising to stay in touch. But Lucas could see the relief in her eyes. The sense that a weight she'd been carrying for years was finally lifting. When the party wound down and people started drifting back to their desks, Victoria caught Lucas's eye. Walk me out? She asked. Of course. They took the elevator down together, not saying much. When they reached the lobby, Victoria paused. This is it, she said. Yeah, Lucas said. It is. Victoria looked around the building one last time, then turned to him. I'll see you tonight? Lucas nodded. 7 o'clock, don't be late. Victoria smiled. I won't. She walked out the doors, and Lucas watched her go, feeling something shift in his chest. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of something neither of them could predict. And for the first time in a long time, that felt okay. That evening, Lucas stood outside the restaurant they had agreed on, checking his watch for the 3rd time. It was 7:15 and Victoria still hadn't shown up. He pulled out his phone to text her, but before he could, he heard her voice behind him. Sorry I'm late. He turned. Victoria was standing there in jeans and a sweater, her hair down for the first time since he'd met her. She looked younger, freer. You're here, Lucas said, smiling. I'm here, Victoria said, and I'm officially unemployed. How does it feel? Terrifying, Victoria admitted, but also kind of amazing. They went inside and ordered food, falling into easy conversation. It felt different than it had before, lighter somehow, without the weight of their professional relationship hanging over them. Halfway through the meal, Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and laughed. What? Lucas asked. Daniel just sent me a panicked email about a client meeting, Victoria said. He wants advice. Are you going to help him? Nope, Victoria said, setting her phone face down on the table. I'm officially off the clock. Lucas raised his glass. To being off the clock. Victoria clinked her glass against his. To new beginnings. They talked for hours, long after they'd finished eating, about the future, about what Victoria wanted to do next, about the fact that neither of them had any idea what they were doing but were willing to figure it out together. When they finally left the restaurant, it was raining. Victoria groaned. Of course it is, she said. Lucas laughed. Come on, my car's this way. They ran through the rain, laughing like teenagers, and by the time they reached his car, they were both soaked. Lucas started the engine and cranked the heat, but the car sputtered and died. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, trying the ignition again. Nothing. Victoria started laughing. This is a disaster. This is definitely a disaster, Lucas agreed. So what do we do now? Lucas looked at her, rainwater dripping from her hair, her eyes bright with laughter, and he felt something click into place. We call a cab, he said, and we accept that this is probably the most ridiculous first date in history. First date, Victoria repeated, smiling. I like the sound of that. Yeah, Lucas said, me too. They ended up sitting in the back seat of a cab, rain drumming on the roof, their hands clasped between them. And despite the broken-down car, and the rain, and the fact that nothing had gone according to plan, Lucas couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this happy. You know what? Victoria said. What? I think we're going to be okay, she said. Lucas squeezed her hand. Yeah, I think we are. The weeks that followed were messy and uncertain and nothing like Lucas had imagined. Victoria struggled with not having a job for the first time in her adult life. Lucas struggled with the fact that their relationship was now public knowledge, and not everyone at the office was supportive. People whispered. People judged. People made assumptions about why Victoria had really stepped down. But through it all, they had each other. Victoria started consulting, building her own small practice, helping startups navigate growth. Lucas threw himself into his work, eventually getting promoted to lead strategist. They didn't live together, didn't rush into anything, just took it one day at a time, figuring out what it meant to build something real. And slowly, the noise faded. One Saturday morning, 6 months after Victoria's last day, Lucas woke up to find her sitting at his kitchen table, laptop open, coffee in hand. "Morning," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Morning," Victoria said, not looking up from her screen. "What are you working on?" "Pitch deck for a new client," Victoria said. "They want to scale fast, and I'm trying to talk them into scaling smart instead." Lucas smiled. "Sounds familiar." Victoria glanced up at him. "Yeah, well, some lessons stick." Lucas poured himself coffee and sat down across from her. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret it?" Lucas asked. "Leaving the company?" Victoria thought about it. "Sometimes," she admitted, "when things are hard or uncertain, but then I remember what it felt like to be trapped in that office, carrying weight that was never supposed to be mine alone. And I know I made the right choice." "Even if it's scary?" "Especially because it's scary," Victoria said. "Because choosing to be scared means I'm finally living." Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm proud of you. You know that, right?" Victoria's eyes softened. "Yeah, I know." They sat there for a while, just holding hands across the table, and Lucas thought about how far they'd both come. From that locked office door to this quiet morning, from breaking down to building something new. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real. And that was enough. Later that afternoon, they went for a walk through the city. The sun was out, and the streets were crowded with people enjoying the weekend. They stopped at a food truck for lunch, ate on a park bench, and talked about everything and nothing. At one point, Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at it and smiled. "It's Daniel," she said. "Answer it," Lucas said. Victoria did. "Hey Daniel, what's up?" Lucas could hear Daniel's voice on the other end, excited and slightly frantic. Victoria listened, nodding occasionally, then laughed. "Tell them to trust their instincts," she said. "And if they don't have instincts yet, tell them to call me." She hung up and shook her head. "He's panicking about a campaign launch." "Are you going to help him?" Lucas asked. "Maybe," Victoria said. "But not today. Today's mine." Lucas smiled. "Ours." "Ours," Victoria agreed. They kept walking, and eventually ended up at the building where Victoria used to work. She stood there for a moment, looking up at it. "You okay?" Lucas asked. "Yeah," Victoria said, "just thinking about how different everything looks from down here." "Better or worse?" Victoria turned to him. "Different, but better." Lucas kissed her, right there on the sidewalk, and when they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. "Come on," she said. "Let's get out of here." They walked away together, hand in hand, leaving the past behind and stepping into a future neither of them could predict. But for the first time in a long time, neither of them was afraid, because they'd learned something most people never do, that the person who saves you isn't always the one you expect. Sometimes it's the one who sees your worth long before you ever do, the one who steps in when you're falling apart, the one who's willing to risk everything for the chance to build something real. And sometimes, if you're lucky, that person becomes the one you can't imagine living without. The first year wasn't easy. Lucas had expected that. He'd braced himself for the whispers, the sideways glances, the assumptions people would make about him and Victoria. What he hadn't expected was how much it would hurt when former colleagues he'd considered friends suddenly went cold on him. It started small. Invitations to after-work drinks that stopped coming. Conversations that died when he walked into the break room. And then there was Marcus from the creative team, who cornered him one day in the parking garage. "Must be nice," Marcus said, his tone casual but his eyes hard. "Getting a promotion right after the boss you were sleeping with steps down." Lucas felt his jaw tighten. "I earned that promotion." "Sure you did," Marcus said. "Just like you earned all those reassignments when you were going through your divorce. Funny how that worked out." "Say what you mean, Marcus," Lucas said evenly. "I mean, maybe some of us had to actually work for what we got," Marcus said, "instead of getting special treatment because we were screwing the CEO." Lucas took a step forward, his hands clenched. "You don't know what you're talking about." Don't I? Marcus said. Everyone knows she was protecting you. Everyone knows you two had something going on long before she stepped down. But sure, keep telling yourself you earned it. Lucas wanted to hit him, wanted to defend himself, defend Victoria, make Marcus understand that it hadn't been like that. But he knew it wouldn't matter. People had already made up their minds, so he walked away. And when he got to his car, he sat there for 10 minutes, trying to calm down before driving home. That night, he told Victoria what had happened. They were at her apartment, sitting on the couch with takeout containers spread across the coffee table. Victoria had been telling him about a difficult client meeting when he interrupted her. Someone at work confronted me today, Lucas said. Victoria set down her fork. About what? About us. About the fact that I got promoted after you left. He said I only got ahead because we were together. Victoria's expression darkened. Who said that? It doesn't matter. It does to me, Victoria said. Victoria, tell me who it was, she said, her voice sharp. Lucas sighed. Marcus. From Creative. Victoria stood, pacing to the window. I'll call Daniel. I'll have him deal with it. No, Lucas said. You can't do that. Why not? Because it'll just prove their point, Lucas said. That I need you to fight my battles. That I can't handle things on my own. Victoria turned to face him. He's spreading lies about you. Maybe, Lucas said, but confronting it will only make it worse. People are going to think what they want to think. We can't control that. Victoria crossed her arms. So what? We just let them say whatever they want? No, Lucas said. We prove them wrong. I do good work. You build your business. And eventually, the truth speaks for itself. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, then sat back down. I hate that you have to deal with this. I know, Lucas said, but it comes with the territory. It shouldn't, Victoria said quietly. No, Lucas agreed, but it does. They sat in silence for a while, the food getting cold between them. Then Victoria said, Do you regret it, being with me? Lucas looked at her, surprised. What? No, why would you ask that? Because your life would be easier if we weren't together, Victoria said. You wouldn't have to deal with people questioning every success you have. You wouldn't have to defend yourself. You're right, Lucas said. My life would be easier, but it would also be emptier. Victoria's eyes softened. You mean that? Yeah, Lucas said. I do. Victoria leaned against him and Lucas wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They stayed like that for a long time, not saying anything, just being together. And Lucas realized something. The whispers hurt. The judgment stung. But none of it mattered as much as what he had with Victoria. The months rolled on, and slowly, things started to shift. Lucas kept his head down and did his work. He led campaigns that won awards. He mentored junior team members. He showed up early and stayed late and proved, day after day, that he belonged. And people started to notice. Not everyone. There were still people like Marcus who would never see past their assumptions. But there were others, Daniel, Jen, even some of the newer hires who saw Lucas for who he was. And that was enough. Meanwhile, Victoria was building something of her own. Her consulting practice grew steadily, and within 6 months she had more clients than she could handle. She hired an assistant, then a junior consultant, then another. And before long, she wasn't just consulting anymore. She was running a company again. But this time, it was different. This time, it was on her terms. One evening, about 18 months after Victoria had stepped down, Lucas came home to find her sitting at his kitchen table, surrounded by papers. What's all this? He asked. Victoria looked up, her eyes bright. I'm incorporating. Lucas blinked. What? I'm turning the consulting practice into a full agency, Victoria said. I've got enough clients now that it makes sense, and I've been thinking about expanding the team. That's amazing, Lucas said, sitting down across from her. How do you feel about it? Scared, Victoria admitted, but excited. This time, I'm building something that's mine. Not my father's legacy. Not what I'm supposed to do, just mine. You're going to crush it, Lucas said. Victoria smiled. I hope so. What are you going to call it? Victoria hesitated, then said, Hayes and Company. Simple, clean, mine. Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. I'm proud of you. Thanks, Victoria said. But I'm going to need help getting it off the ground. Whatever you need, Lucas said. Victoria squeezed his hand. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Okay. What if you were my first hire? Lucas stared at her. What? I'm serious, Victoria said. I need someone I trust to help build this thing. Someone who understands strategy and clients and how to make a business work. And I can't think of anyone better than you. Lucas didn't know what to say. Victoria, I have a job. I know, she said, and I'm not asking you to quit tomorrow, but think about it. We could build something together, something that's ours. Lucas thought about it, thought about the office where people still whispered about him, thought about working for a company that would always remind him of the past. And then he thought about building something new with Victoria, something that didn't come with baggage or judgment. Can I sleep on it? He asked. Of course, Victoria said. That night, Lucas couldn't stop thinking about Victoria's offer. Part of him loved the idea of working with her, of building something from the ground up, but another part of him worried that mixing business with their relationship would complicate things in ways they weren't ready for. He called his sister. You're overthinking this, Emma said after he'd explained the situation. I'm not, Lucas protested. You are, Emma said. Look, do you want to do it? I think so, Lucas said. But what if it ruins what we have? What if it makes it better? Emma countered. Lucas was quiet. Listen, Emma said, you've spent the last 2 years rebuilding your life. You left a bad marriage, found someone who actually sees you, and proved to everyone, including yourself, that you're capable of more than they gave you credit for. So stop second-guessing yourself and do what feels right. When did you get so wise? Lucas asked. I've always been wise, Emma said. You just never listened. Lucas laughed. Fair enough. So what are you going to tell her? Emma asked. Lucas thought about it. I'm going to say yes. Good, Emma said. Now go build something amazing. The next morning, Lucas walked into Victoria's apartment with coffee and bagels. I'm in, he said. Victoria looked up from her laptop. Yeah? Yeah, Lucas said. Let's do this. Victoria stood and crossed the room, wrapping her arms around him. You're sure? I'm sure, Lucas said. But I have conditions. Of course you do, Victoria said, pulling back to look at him. What are they? 1, we keep work and personal separate as much as possible. No fighting about strategy in bed. Victoria laughed. Deal. 2, we do this right. Contracts, clear roles, all of it. I'm not your employee. I'm your partner. I wouldn't have it any other way, Victoria said. And 3, Lucas said, if it doesn't work out, we walk away from the business, not each other. Victoria's expression softened. Agreed. Lucas gave his notice at the old firm 2 weeks later. Daniel was disappointed but understanding. Jen threw him a going-away party. And on his last day, as Lucas packed up his desk, he realized he wasn't sad. He was ready. The first few months at Hayes & Co. were chaotic. Lucas and Victoria worked out of her apartment, taking meetings in coffee shops and building pitch decks at midnight. They argued about branding and client strategy and how many hours were too many hours. But they also laughed, and they built something that felt real and solid and theirs. Within 6 months, they'd outgrown the apartment and rented a small office downtown. Within a year, they'd hired 3 more people. And within 18 months, Hayes & Company was competing with some of the biggest agencies in the city. But success came with its own challenges. One particularly brutal week, they lost a major client to a competitor, had a junior consultant quit unexpectedly, and got hit with an unexpected tax bill that made Victoria's accountant visibly wince. Lucas found Victoria in her office late one night, staring at a spreadsheet like it had personally wronged her. Hey, he said, knocking on the door frame. Victoria looked up, exhausted. Hey. Talk to me, Lucas said, sitting down. We're bleeding money, Victoria said bluntly. The Anderson contract was 30% of our revenue, and now it's gone. If we don't land something big in the next 2 months, we're going to have to let people go. Lucas leaned back in his chair. So we land something big. It's not that simple, Victoria said. It never is, Lucas said. But we've done harder things than this. Victoria laughed, but it was bitter. Have we? Yeah, Lucas said. You walked away from a company you built with your own hands. I left a marriage that was killing me. We rebuilt our lives from scratch. We can figure this out." Victoria looked at him, and some of the tension in her shoulders eased. "You really believe that?" "I do," Lucas said, "but we have to be smart about it. What's our best play?" They spent the next 3 hours mapping out a strategy. They identified potential clients, refined their pitch, and divided up responsibilities. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't guaranteed. But it was a plan. And 2 weeks later, they landed a contract with a tech startup that was worth twice what they'd lost. Victoria cried when she got the call. Lucas held her, laughing, and they celebrated by ordering pizza and working until 3 in the morning because they were too excited to sleep. 2 years after Lucas joined Hayes & Co., the agency was thriving. They'd moved into a bigger office, hired a full team, and built a reputation for delivering results. But more importantly, they'd built something together that neither of them had to sacrifice themselves for. One Friday evening, Victoria walked into Lucas's office and closed the door. "I need to talk to you about something," she said. Lucas looked up from his computer. "Okay, what's up?" Victoria sat down, her expression serious. "I've been thinking about the future, about what we want this company to become." And I think it's time to bring on a partner," Victoria said. "Someone who can help us scale without burning out." Lucas nodded slowly. "Makes sense. Who are you thinking?" Victoria looked at him. "You." Lucas blinked. "What?" "I want to make you a full partner," Victoria said. 50-50 ownership, equal say in everything." "Victoria, before you say no, hear me out," Victoria said. "You've been with me from the beginning. You've put in the work, taken the risks, and built this company as much as I have. You deserve to be a partner, not just in name, but in reality." Lucas didn't know what to say. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Victoria said. Lucas felt something warm settle in his chest. "Then, yes, absolutely yes." Victoria smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made Lucas remember why he'd fallen for her in the first place. "Good, because I already had the paperwork drawn up." Lucas laughed. "Of course you did." They shook hands across the desk, and then Victoria pulled him into a hug. "We're really doing this," she said. "Yeah," Lucas said. "We really are." That night, they went out to celebrate. They picked a nice restaurant downtown, the kind of place they used to avoid because it felt too expensive. But tonight, they didn't care. Over wine and steak, they talked about the future, about where they wanted the company to go, about the life they were building together. And somewhere between the appetizers and dessert, Lucas realized something. He was happy, genuinely, completely happy. And he couldn't remember the last time he'd been able to say that. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked, watching him. "Just that this is nice," Lucas said. "All of it. The company. This dinner. You." Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. "Yeah, it is." They finished their meal and walked out into the cool night air. The city was alive around them, lights glowing, people moving, the world humming with possibility. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Victoria said as they walked. "What?" "That day in my office," Victoria said. "When I locked the door and asked you when was the last time someone checked if you were okay." Lucas remembered. "What about it?" "I keep thinking about how scared I was to say anything," Victoria said. "How convinced I was that if I acknowledged what I was feeling, I'd lose everything." "And now?" Lucas asked. Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. "Now I know that the things worth having are the things that scare you the most." Lucas pulled her close, kissing her right there on the sidewalk. And when they broke apart, Victoria was smiling. "Come on," she said. "Let's go home." They walked back to the parking garage where Lucas's car, a new one that actually worked, was waiting. And as they drove through the city, Lucas thought about how far they'd both come. From that locked office door to this moment, from breaking down to building up, from feeling lost to finding each other. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been smooth, but it had been real. And that was all that mattered. 6 months later, Lucas stood in the new Hayes & Co. office, looking out at the city skyline. The space was bigger than he'd ever imagined they'd need. 3 floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view that made him feel like they'd actually made it. Victoria walked up beside him, 2 glasses of champagne in her hands. "Big day," she said, handing him a glass. Huge, Lucas agreed. They were celebrating the company's third anniversary. The team was gathered in the conference room, music playing, people laughing. It was the kind of moment Lucas used to dream about back when he was drowning in his old life. You know what's wild? Lucas said. What? 3 years ago, I was sitting in a courtroom watching my marriage end, Lucas said. And now I'm standing here with you, running a company we built from nothing. Victoria leaned against him. Life's funny like that. Yeah, Lucas said. It is. They stood there for a while watching the city below. Then Victoria said, Can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever think about that day? Victoria asked. The day you came to work after your divorce? All the time, Lucas said. What do you think would have happened if I hadn't called you into my office? Victoria asked. Lucas thought about it. I think I would have kept pretending I was fine until I wasn't, and then I would have crashed hard. And now? Now I'm grateful you didn't let that happen, Lucas said. Victoria smiled. Me too. They clinked glasses and took a sip, and Lucas felt a sense of peace settle over him that he'd never quite felt before. Behind them, Jen appeared in the doorway. Hey, you two coming back to the party? Daniel's about to do karaoke and it's going to be a disaster. Victoria laughed. We wouldn't miss it. As they walked back to the conference room, Lucas realized something. The locked office door that had once felt like the end of everything had actually been the beginning. The moment when someone had seen him, really seen him, and refused to let him disappear. And from that moment, everything had changed. The party went late into the night. People shared stories about their favorite projects, toasted to the company's success, and made plans for the future. And when everyone finally left, Lucas and Victoria were the last ones standing, cleaning up empty bottles and straightening chairs. Hell of a night, Lucas said. Hell of a 3 years, Victoria replied. They turned off the lights and locked up, walking out into the quiet hallway. The building was empty now, just the two of them and the hum of the ventilation system. You know what I realized tonight? Victoria said as they waited for the elevator. What's that? That I don't miss it, Victoria said. The old job, the old life, any of it. Really? Lucas asked. Really, Victoria said. Because that version of my life was built on what I thought I was supposed to want. This version is built on what I actually want. The elevator arrived and they stepped inside. As the doors closed, Lucas said, And what is it you actually want? Victoria looked at him. This, you, a life where I don't have to choose between being successful and being happy. Lucas smiled. That sounds pretty good to me. When they got to the parking garage, Lucas walked Victoria to her car. See you at home? She asked. I'll be right behind you, Lucas said. Victoria kissed him, then got in her car and drove away. Lucas stood there for a moment, watching her taillights disappear, and thought about the journey that had brought them here. It hadn't been a straight line. There had been setbacks and doubts, and moments when both of them had wondered if they were making a terrible mistake. But they'd pushed through. They'd trusted each other, and they'd built something that neither of them could have built alone. As Lucas drove home through the quiet city streets, he thought about the man he'd been 3 years ago. Broken, lost, convinced that his best days were behind him, and he thought about the man he was now, stronger, clearer, building a future instead of clinging to a past that had never really fit. It was the same city, the same streets, but everything else had changed. When Lucas got home, Victoria was already there, changed into sweatpants and making tea in the kitchen. Hey, she said when he walked in. Hey yourself, Lucas said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. They stood like that for a while, swaying slightly to music that wasn't playing, just being together in the quiet. I love you, Victoria said softly. Lucas kissed the top of her head. I love you too. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud, and it felt right, like something they'd both known for a long time but hadn't been ready to name. Victoria turned in his arms, looking up at him. You know what's crazy? What? If someone had told me 3 years ago that I'd walk away from everything I'd built for a chance at this, I never would have believed them, Victoria said. But I would do it again in a heartbeat. Yeah, Lucas asked. Yeah, Victoria said, because you were right. The things worth having are the things that scare you the most. Lucas smiled. Pretty sure you said that. Did I? Victoria said, grinning. Well, I'm very wise. You are, Lucas agreed. They stayed up late that night talking about everything and nothing, about the clients they wanted to pursue, about the vacation they'd been promising themselves for months, about the fact that neither of them had any idea where they'd be in 5 years, but they were excited to find out together. And when they finally went to bed, Lucas lay there in the dark, listening to Victoria's breathing slow as she drifted off to sleep, and thought about how lucky he was. Not because everything had worked out perfectly. It hadn't. There were still hard days and difficult clients and moments when they fought about stupid things, but because he'd found someone who saw him, who had noticed when he was falling apart and stepped in without being asked, who had risked everything for the chance to build something real. And that was worth more than any perfect plan could ever be. The next morning, Lucas woke up to find Victoria already awake, sitting up in bed with her laptop balanced on her knees. Working already? He asked, his voice still rough with sleep. Just checking emails, Victoria said, not looking up. Lucas glanced at the clock. It was barely 6 in the morning. You know we own the company now, right? He said. We can take a day off. Victoria closed her laptop and looked at him. I know, but I like what we're building, and I don't want to lose momentum. Lucas sat up, rubbing his eyes. Fair enough. What's on the agenda today? Pitch meeting with a potential client at 10, Victoria said. Then I need to review the quarterly financials, and we have that call with the design team at 3. Sounds like a full day, Lucas said. Yeah, Victoria said, but a good one. They got ready together, moving around the apartment in the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over the years. Coffee, breakfast, trading sections of the newspaper, small moments that added up to something bigger. As they headed out the door, Lucas's phone buzzed. It was a text from Jen. Jen, congrats on last night. You two have built something amazing. Lucas showed Victoria the message. She smiled. We really have, haven't we? She said. Yeah, Lucas said, we really have. And as they walked out into the morning sun, ready to face whatever the day would bring, Lucas realized something he'd known for a while but hadn't fully accepted until now. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not because some grand plan had led him here, not because everything had gone smoothly, but because he'd made choices, hard choices, scary choices, that had brought him to this moment. He'd chosen to leave a marriage that was slowly killing him. He'd chosen to be honest about what he felt, even when it was terrifying. He'd chosen to take a risk on someone who saw his worth before he did. And Victoria had made choices too. She'd chosen to notice when someone was struggling. She'd chosen to step in when no one else did. She'd chosen to walk away from everything she'd built for the chance to build something new. Together, they'd chosen each other, again and again, through the hard days and the good ones, through the uncertainty and the success. And that, more than any locked door or dramatic gesture or perfect moment, was what love actually looked like. It was choosing someone when it was hard, showing up when it mattered, building something together that neither of them could build alone. As Lucas and Victoria walked into the Hayes & Co. office that morning, ready to face another day of challenges and triumphs, Lucas thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that courthouse to this office, from breaking down behind a locked door to building something that mattered, from feeling invisible to being seen. It hadn't been perfect. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it, every single moment. And in the end, that was all anyone could really ask for. A life that felt real, a love that felt true, and the courage to choose both, even when the world said it was impossible. Lucas looked at Victoria as she unlocked the office door, her profile silhouetted against the morning light, and he smiled. Because the person who had saved him wasn't just the one who had seen his worth. She was the one who had shown him how to see it in himself. And that made all the difference.